All right, and welcome everyone to our webinar tonight with our partners from Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. As most of you know, my name is Dan Moylanen. I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Association of Conservation Districts. And tonight we're joined by John Switzer, who's the Conservation Programs Manager at MDARD, Rachel Guth and Christy Roman, who are both regional coordinators for MDARD. And we're going to cover a wide variety of information here regarding the fiscal year 22 MDARD operations grant for conservation districts. So with that, I just wanted to plug a couple things before we get started. I want to, really again commend everyone who's been involved over the last few years with our collective legislative advocacy efforts. It really was people reaching out and touching bases with their legislators that helped us, secure this operations grant. And you'll learn tonight that there's a lot of great information in terms of what are some of the things that districts have been doing around the state with this $40,000, and to see this sort of 50,000 foot level of what 74 unique organizations are doing. When we really start adding up the numbers, it's really impressive and really exciting. So thank you to everyone who's been involved and stayed in touch with the association in terms of this advocacy process, because your engagement is really critical to this. So with that, I also want to invite folks to join us on May 18th, Thursday, May 18th. We're going to be in Lansing for our Capitol Day. And I really, if you weren't planning on attending, or if you were kind of on the fence about it, I really want to encourage you to join, because it really does make a difference when we have a really large presence and a number of folks from all around the state there to engage with legislators. And I have to say too, as a former legislative staffer, it can be disappointing when you go to Capitol Day events like this, and then you don't see your constituents there to interact with. So don't let that be your legislator who shows up at the event and doesn't have any constituents there to talk with and interact with. So we'll have more details coming out soon, but I do want to encourage you to RSVP to Taylor Pack. She's collecting all the RSVPs and working on putting together meetings with legislators. And all of that will culminate with a lunch and learn event that we'll be hosting in the Mackinac Room at the House Office Building. So with that, I also wanted to mention that we have our summer conference coming together. Really excited about the content that's been put together by the planning committee, as well as a number of folks from the conservation district community who are really this year. It's sort of almost a DIY conference, in the sense that we've got folks submitting their own ideas for sessions. And so in many ways, we're going to have sessions that celebrate some of the successful programming and things that our districts are doing around the state, and wonderful examples that we can model our own programming at our own districts throughout Michigan. So as always, the conference is going to be June 5th and 6th in Bay City. And, in future years, we'll look into maybe some different locations, but with Bay City, it was convenient and easy for my end. So we're going to be there at least one more year. But I want to definitely encourage folks to keep an eye out, because we're going to be announcing the schedule very soon. I am actually working on finalizing it right now, and we're hoping to have the registration page up by next week. So stay tuned, keep an eye on your inbox, keep an eye on Slack. We'll make sure to share that information in several places. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to John, so we can get started on this presentation. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A. And just so for some housekeeping purposes, if you have any questions when we get to that, you can just raise your hand, and then I'll try to keep track of whose hands go up first, and we'll try to answer those questions in order. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to John. Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. And I'd also like to introduce, as Dan mentioned, presenting with me tonight will be Rachel Guth and Christy Roman. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, please.
Well, I'm Rachel. I think a lot of you know me. I cover the UP, and I'm the former district manager in Marquette CD. So I'm happy to be here.
And I'm Christy Roman, and I am also a regional coordinator covering Northeast Michigan, and I also was a district manager in Antrim Conservation District.
Great, thank you. And Rachel, if you want to start sharing your screen, that'd be great. So I'm the Conservation Programs Manager with Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. I oversee conservation district operations as well as several conservation programs that we run through our partners in conservation districts. I'm actually coming up on my 6-year anniversary working for the department here in a couple of weeks. And prior to that, I spent 10 years working for the Clinton Conservation District just north of Lansing. So the three of us are going to tag team on this presentation here this evening, highlighting the fiscal year 23 operations grant, as well as talking about some accomplishments that were achieved through last year's 22 operations grant. So with that, we'll jump right into it. We're going to cover a few different topics here, a little recap and highlights from last year, talk briefly on the legislative report, highlighting the outcomes from the 22 grant, and then we'll roll into Rachel taking over, talking about the accomplishment reporting form, and Christy talking about some of the new deliverables in the 23 grant. So to highlight some of the recap, some of the highlights from fiscal year 22, you recall that $3 million was appropriated for conservation district operations to be divided equally amongst the 75 conservation districts. 74 fully executed and completed those grants, totaling a payout of $2,960,000. The one grant that was not executed was the Macomb Conservation District, which has been inactive for a number of years, and we're actually in the process as we speak of having some conversations around how to help get that district up off the ground and running again. So with that, we had some, as you know, a deliverables-based grant. So we had a requirement consistent with district law for an audit to be completed at least every other year. We had 24 audits submitted from fiscal year 20 and 50 audits submitted from fiscal year 21. And all 74 districts submitted an annual budget for the current fiscal year that grant was in operation. Moving on, we also asked districts to track any additional grant funding that they applied for, especially if they were leveraging in any way, shape, or form the operations grant that they received. So pretty amazing to see that overall districts applied for just shy of 250 new grants during last year, and very high success rate of 168 new grants were awarded, totaling just shy of $12 million. So pretty tremendous 4-to-1 leveraging of the $3 million that was handed out to districts. Pretty impressive numbers there. You'll see there the top 5 districts in grant dollars leveraged, additional grant funding that was brought in last year. Aranac north of $2 million, Delta 1.7, Lenawee just shy of $1 million, Ottawa 800,000, and Chippewa-Lucimac $700,000. Again, pretty tremendous accomplishments in just 1 year's time. We also asked districts to conduct a conservation needs assessment, and this is somewhat of a new term from not a new concept. We used to call it the natural resources assessment. It's had a few other terms. We tried to align some of the language to be consistent with what's in NRCS policy, but this is the survey effort to engage with local stakeholders and community members on what are the pressing priority needs in individual conservation districts. And this is kind of the first step, the stepping stone, the basis of what forms some additional plans and priorities for conservation districts to focus on. Really glad to see that all 74 districts were able to complete and submit a summary of the conservation needs assessment that they conducted. We had over 11,000 responses, almost 12,000 responses statewide, which is just amazing to see the number of outreach effort and feedback that districts were able to collect. You'll see here the kind of the top priorities that were identified, and this is when you kind of pull the responses together. The number of districts that had these topics identified in their top priorities. So water quality being number 1, followed pretty closely by improved forest management, invasive species, and then wildlife habitat, improved riparian wetland habitat, and then, you know, ag-related soil erosion, soil health. There was a pretty steep drop off after those 6. And so that's why we kind of highlighted those as the really top priorities in the state. A lot of overlap across district and across regions even, but it's neat to be able to have that data to be able to point to and see where districts are really focusing their time and effort. Moving on, we also asked districts to track their outreach efforts, and just another amazing set of data here that we're able to share out. Over 1,100 outreach events and workshops were hosted, and just shy of 70,000 people, amazing, 70,000 people participated in those outreach events. You know, whether those were online webinars, whether they were physical workshops or other meetings. Just pretty neat to see the response that folks were able to garner and doing some of this natural resource education outreach. You'll see there top 5 outreach attendance: Washtenaw Conservation District, 4,500 people; Aranac, just shy of 5,000; Kalkaska, 3,500; Marquette, 3,300; Ironbarg, 3,000. Again, those were the top 5. A lot of good things were done last year. So the other thing that we've struggled being able to really have an accurate number data set for was number of district employees. So that was another thing we asked folks to track and help us get a handle on, and we've got some nice firm numbers for last year: 231 full-time employees, 86 seasonal employees, and then overall districts were delivering 443 programs. Also board members, board meetings conducted 751 across the state over the year, attending over 1,000 local municipality partnership meetings, and interacting with legislators in one way, shape, or form, 271 instances of that. So really, really good data set to be able to capture and highlight the work that is being done by districts on a day-to-day basis. And if you flip to the next one, thank you. We were required to capture this data in a report to legislature, and we just did that. We just got that submitted. I think that was due back at the end of February, beginning of March. And this is just, you can see the link here. It's not a real easy, simple one to write down, but if you go to our website, or if you simply search MDARD legislative reports, you can get this website, and you'll see highlighted there under fiscal year 23 reports. I've highlighted the district operations report, and you'll be able to see and download that. The summary of all those things that I just highlighted there, with a little bit of narrative included on each of those topics. Additionally, for those of you who are interested, we did just release our division annual reports. And in the same web page here, you'll see right underneath that link I put at the top, it says about MDARD. If you click that drop down, there's a tab for annual reports, division annual reports, and it'll be laid out by division. So if you scroll down to the environmental stewardship report, you'll see the fiscal year 22 annual report for environmental stewardship division. That will include things like conservation district operations, more of the things that me and my staff did working with conservation districts. Also the MEAT program, the C-type program, any of the other, the forestry program, any of the other grant funded programs that MDARD runs through conservation districts will have an annual report, as well as several other programs that are administered through the division. So if you're interested in seeing some of the other side of things that the department's been working on, you'll be able to find that those annual reports through that link as well. And I think Dan just plunked that into the chat there. So I guess with that, before I turn it over to Rachel, I'll just remind folks, and we're going to talk about this here in a minute, the importance of the data that is collected through those quarterly accomplishments reports. It is being used. We are looking at it for a lot of purposes, as well as reporting that out to the legislature to help highlight the work that's being done. So I appreciate the folks taking time to fill out that annual or that quarterly report accurately and get that submitted to us in a timely fashion so that we can summarize this data and be able to share it out. So with that, I will hand it off to Rachel, who's going to talk more about that reporting form.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so hopefully everyone knows the reporting form that we're talking about. We've submitted it to you in Excel as a template. The one thing to keep in mind for this reporting coming up here on April 7th and beyond is that you would want to collect your Q1 template and add to it for Q2 and beyond, and keep submitting it to us so that we're summarizing your full year. We didn't make very many changes to it. I think what you've probably noticed is that it is locked. We locked most of the cells. Some of the tabs completely are locked for editing. We did this because last year we found some of the formulas weren't able to be carried over and stuff. So hopefully it is a little easier for you and a bit easier for us as well. I do want to remind folks to please don't download the template into Google Drive. What we're finding is that Google Drive is opening up those edits. So if you're able to edit throughout your document, something has gone wrong and we may have lost some of the formulas. So your best bet is to save it to your computer and work off of it from there. So this is the Q2 reporting tab, and a few things that I want to mention here. So at the top of the Q1 through 4 tabs, you'll see the CD name. So your district name is captured in Q1 and it's locked after that. So if you're working in your Q2 reporting here in the next week and you see that you don't have a conservation district name on the top, please go into Q1 and plunk it in and it'll carry through. Also, you should only be able to edit into certain cells. Mostly it's the monthly cells. If you feel like you need to explain any of your data, just throw a comment into the optional narrative and we will collect it there. And when you're looking at that bottom section, we do call it an optional narrative, but please consider adding any of your success stories. We do want to hear from you so that advocacy can be promoted at the state level. This is the Q4 reporting tab. A few things that I want to mention here. So again, your conservation district's name is at the top. You'll see this year we've added a question about millage support. So if you are collecting a millage within your county, we would ask you to put a 1 for yes or a 0 for no. We're also asking a question about the number of trees and shrubs that were sold in your plant sales. Estimates are okay. And then under CD operations, you'll see that we're asking for your number of district programs, the number of full-time employees that you have, seasonal employees, and then we've added 2 questions on attrition. So we're trying to capture the refilled positions for both technicians and your administrative positions. And I'll kind of touch on these here coming up. I'm jumping ahead real quick to the to the summary tab. So this is the tab at the end of your 4 quarters that's capturing your whole year, and nothing in this tab is editable. So what I wanted to point out is along the bottom here, you'll see the attrition rate. What we're trying to do is capture the rate of employee retention. We're hoping to collect this in-house across the state to look at things like stability, your success and capacity. We're going to share this with MACD and kind of use this data moving forward. So going back to Q4's tab, this is the second half of that spreadsheets tab, and I wanted to point out your output is in here. So these are the main deliverables in your fiscal year 23 operating grant. Keep in mind that several of these things are going to take several months to work on. So, you know, just plan accordingly, use your resources, use your partners. I know last year we had a lot of this in there, and some folks were a little surprised in quarter 4 when they realized that this was coming up. So just as a heads up, you don't need to submit your policies to us. We're just asking you to make sure that you have them in-house, that your district boards are reviewing them every year. And then this is the description tab. So this is the last tab of the spreadsheet. And I really want to spend the most time here because we do get a lot of questions, and it is really important that we're all on the same page for reporting to ensure that statewide accomplishments are accurate. I mean, especially when John starts working on the legislative report. So looking at the top here, hopefully the number of new grant proposals submitted is pretty clear. The number of new grants received is any grant that hits your desk that you're awarded. That can be reoccurring grants. So thinking about Farm Bill Biologist or the Hunting Access Program, stuff like that is fine, but please do not include any MDARD grants in there. For the federal funds received and the state funds received, these are your grants that are awarded. So we're looking for the total dollar amount of the grant as it hits your desk. So you should be reporting that grant one time and only one time. We don't want to see reimbursements here. So if you report it for the quarter, we shouldn't see any of those funds again. So hopefully that's clear. We tried to change the language a little bit this year. We might change it a little bit more next year, but it's your grants awarded. For local grants or appropriations, any kind of local funding sources like township or county appropriations, but please do not include your millage funds here. We're not collecting your millage funds at all. We're just asking whether or not you get one. Other funds is anything else. So foundations, donations, please don't include your tree sale or fee for service or anything like that. Moving down, millage support. So yes or no if you're getting one, your number of trees and plants sold for the year. Looking at CD operations, board meetings include special meetings. For number of programs, there were some hiccups last year, so we tried to lay it out a little bit better this year, but really any program that your district is implementing should be considered here. So it could be a SISMA, you might have a forestry assistance program, you might have scrap tire collections or a 319 grant. If you think about your QuickBooks accounting classes, generally I would assume a lot of these will have their own class, and so that might be a good guide for you. But if you are questioning anything, just reach out to your regional coordinator. We are here to help you. For full-time employees, a full-time employee for us is anybody who works 30 hours or more a week. So if you have any part-time staff working less than 30 hours, please consider them a 0.5. So if you have a full-time manager and a part-time watershed coordinator, you'd be reporting to us 1.5 for the year. And then for your seasonal employees, it's just the total number of seasonal employees you've got helping with your field season, your tree sale, etc. And then for the attrition rates, so if you have had any vacancies over the course of the year and you've refilled them for technical staff or administrative staff, please record that. So we're not looking at new hires. So you've got a new grant and you're kicking off a cool watershed program locally and you're hiring a watershed coordinator for the first time. That's not what we're trying to collect here. So we're just looking at, you've had a vacancy and you've now refilled it. So this is the bottom half of the description tab. Any county and township meetings that staff or directors are attending on behalf of the district. For outreach events, we want to collect all of your events. So, you know, we consider your annual meeting, any of your grant program events to be included here. Some of the questions that I've gotten are, we're co-hosting an event with another district. Who counts it? Do we both count it? We definitely want to stay away from double counting. So we would encourage you to have only one of you submit this. So if the district that's hosting it in their county, probably they're the ones that would count it in their accomplishment report and tally up the number of people there. The other district who was helping out should not record it. If you're doing a webinar, obviously that's a little harder. So whoever took the lead on it, or just rock, paper, scissors, but just one district record an outreach event and the number of attendees. But also please keep in mind, if you're telling us that you've hosted an outreach event, make sure that you're letting us know how many people came. And then looking at your output, hopefully this is pretty clear too. You're just reporting the date of your annual meeting and election. For the strategic planning, we're just looking at the date that you submitted your CNA, your annual business plan, and your 5-year long range plans to us. Keep in mind, if you did a conservation needs assessment last year, you don't have to redo it this year. We're asking you to redo it every 5 years. So you're just resubmitting that template summary that we gave you last year to fill out, that most of the districts in the state submitted. You're just resubmitting that. So we have asked it to be due July 7th, but you theoretically can send it in anytime. And then your annual business plan isn't due until, October 5th. I imagine most of you will be putting that off for a little while, but your 5-year long range plan is due July 7th. So whenever it's submitted to us, that'll be the date you include. And then for your policies, the 4 policies there, it's just the date that the board of directors approved them. And again, you don't have to submit them to us. If any of this, if you have any questions or you're unsure about an outreach event and how to count it, stuff like that, just reach out to your regional coordinators. We're here to help you. And I guess with that, I will shift it over to Christy.
Good evening. So as you can see, most of these deliverables did not change this year, but we do have one additional one, and that is your 5-year long range plan. And now I'm going to just take a few minutes and go through each of these deliverables and review them. And most of you have probably submitted already your fiscal year 21 audit, or you've submitted an audit letter of engagement for fiscal year 22. We really just want to remind you that if you did submit a letter of audit engagement, that your audit is due April 7th this year. And when you submit these, we only want the cover letter. We do not want the entire audit. So I also want to remind you to not submit this to the Michigan Department of Treasury. And most of you probably are not going to do that. So really what you want to do is check in with your auditor and ensure that they do not do that. Some units of government are required to do that. So there sometimes is a little confusion, and it's super helpful if you remind your auditor that that does not need to happen for conservation districts. Moving forward, we're going to talk about the conservation needs assessment summary. And as Rachel said, if you did it last year, you're just going to resubmit the summary. And if you didn't do it last year and it is your year to conduct the survey and fill this summary out, then you're going to probably submit a different one. And the things that I want you to think about are that it is highlighting the top resource concerns. We really don't need, if you have a longer version, if you did what we were calling the Cadillac version, we don't want you to submit that. We just want that summary document. And I did see someone asked about these templates. These templates were sent by Kelly Parker in the fall. And so you want to look for an email from Kelly that came out. I think the latest versions came out in December. So you may have them still in your email box and you might want to look for those. Transitioning to the next part of your deliverables is the 5-year long range plan. And so I want to just take a second and I want you to think about this like a funnel. And at the top of the funnel was that conservation needs assessment. And that was where you were surveying and you were trying to find these top 5 very broad priorities. And now with the 5-year long range plan, we want you to take those priorities and think about them from the perspective of how they may be different in 5 years. And so it does somewhat look like a strategic plan, but when you do this, we do not want you to submit a longer version of the plan. Again, we want this summary document. We do want you to take into consideration the priorities that came out of the needs assessment. And of course, you developed mission and vision and values, and those might have been included or should be included in that summary document. But the other thing is that July 7th is going to come real fast. And so if you haven't already started, you're going to want to get right on this. And remember that as regional coordinators, we're here to help you. And we can help in any way that you probably need. So moving forward, the next part of that funnel is that annual business plan. So now we are going to go ahead and take those goals from your CNA, that 5-year plan, and we're going to just break that down into chunks that are achievable in a year, with that idea that in 5 years, those things are going to be done. So they all kind of work together. And the thing I want you to think about is outputs and outcomes. And both of them are part of this annual business plan template. And I want you to think about the difference between them. And so the output we think of as like a widget. These are things like how many site visits you went on, or how many programs, like outreach programs you held, how many BMPs or best management practices did you install. So then we move forward to the outcomes, and I want to just set up an example. So if the output was installing 5 best management practices, then the actual outcome would be the reduction of sediment or improved water quality, but we want that to be measurable. It needs to actually have a definition. So another one to think about, a little harder to define, but I challenge you to start to think about this one is, let's say that your output was an outreach event. Think about what would be measurable from that. What would be a measurable outcome? And there's lots of opportunities to measure. You could measure from the standpoint of a change in behavior. There's some tools out there for that, or increase in knowledge, but just start to think about what is a measurable outcome. And so now we're going to move forward again to questions. And if you would either raise your hand or put your question in the chat, and we will try to address those questions. And I'm going to turn it back over to John for this part.
Okay, so we had a couple questions in the chat already. Sherry Blazek asked, what type of events are counted? Specific examples, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So yeah, we are ideally we're looking for things like the the physical, obviously the physical events, the in-person workshops, the meetings, the trainings. If you're doing some virtual things like this, I think that's also some things that we want to count. I know folks did a lot of those, especially during COVID, figured out that we can do a lot of outreach and have pretty widespread impact, taking advantage of the technology at hand. So I think that those are the ones that are definitely going to want to count. And then I think it gets into the gray area when you're talking about Facebook posts and social media posts, because the last thing we want to do is kind of blow out of proportion the attended outreach events. So if you have a big social media following and you do a post and you get 300 people that like that post or whatever, we don't want to inflate that the number of people that we're reaching from a networking standpoint. Now, maybe what we need to do is add another column there to capture some of the more social media ones, and I think that's a really good thought to consider, because it is still an impact. You are still connecting with folks, getting messages out there, raising awareness. So let me give you a soft answer on that one, and we'll think about it and maybe come back with some more guidance on how to capture those moving forward.
And John, I just wanted to expand a little bit on what you said, because Sherry Blazak mentioned that often people are doing events through Facebook, like Facebook Live, and I do believe that would count as a media or as an outreach. I think what we're talking about is like we're posting, right?
Right. Yes. Thank you. And there was also, to build off that, a question about fairs or a place where you have a table. I would definitely count that as an outreach event and try to capture the number of people that you have contact with, as opposed to there were 2,500 people at this expo. But if you talk to 100 people, handed out cards or some information, that's what we want to focus on.
See, we had a couple other questions about events. There was one question that came in. It was a direct message, said, could we count a joint event as a 0.5 if we did one joint event? I'm assuming that's with another district. That's
a good one. And actually, Rachel asked me that question earlier today, so I think I have a prepared answer. Again, we want to be really cautious about over counting and or double counting, I should say. And the challenge with that approach is then you have to split the number of people that participate in that event. So my preference would be to focus on whoever the district was who kind of took the lead or had the largest role in hosting that event would probably be the one who would claim that event and the number of people associated. And with all these things in the gray areas, don't hesitate to reach out to your regional coordinator, and we can bounce it around and come back to you with an answer too.
So there's a question here from Emily Hickmott. So the funds received are the total amount that will be received over the duration of the grant, or the amount that hit the account this quote unquote quarter? That's
a good question. That's where we're hoping to clear that up a little bit in the guidance. We're specifically interested in that large total grant amount when it was awarded. So when let's say you apply for a grant and you get notification in January that the total grant award is going to be $50,000, then in that quarter you would put $50,000, even if you don't even start working on the grant for another 3 months because you're working on the agreements and the money doesn't start flowing for a couple more months. We want to know that one time that total number, even if it's a multi-year grant and you're not going to get all that for another year or two. We want to know that full amount upfront once it's awarded. That also stems to it. There was a question in here about if that grant gets modified and additional funds are added down the road, how to handle that. I would simply, the month that amendment is executed and those additional grant funds are officially folded into that grant, I would, in that quarter, that month, report just those additional funds that were added to that grant, because you already reported on the initial amount.
Okay, so let's see. Just a comment here from Renee. She said, I really struggled with the annual business plan and how to incorporate Manistee County on shared regional staffing. For example, MDARD grants, as far as I know, are not requiring tracking by county, and the reporting is possibly being double counted. For example, PSP grants, MEP, and FAP.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would you'll have to work closely with the grant host. So if your neighboring district is the host for example, the produce safety grant, but they, you work with the technician to host an event in your county, then I would think you would want to record that as your event in your county. And so I would work closely with that neighboring district manager to just, again, to make sure that double counting isn't occurring.
So I had a question here from Jake that he accidentally sent as a DM to me. He said, what's the status with MACD's ask for our supplemental appropriations requests for fiscal year 23? So to answer that, Jake, we are still meeting with several leaders in both the House and the Senate. But so far, we don't have a bill that's been introduced. Once we do have a bill that's introduced, we'll certainly let folks know. And so you can track it through mi.legislature.gov. That's the main website where you can track any bills that are actively going through the legislature. So once we have some key updates and something to update there, we'll definitely share. I will say, though, that all of our meetings so far this year have been very, very promising. We've had a lot of really good conversations with several leaders in both the House and the Senate already. It turns out also that my former boss, former state representative John Cherry, who now is in the state Senate, is the chair of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee for Agriculture and Natural Resources. So he and I met for coffee recently and had a really good conversation, and he's supportive of our ask. And there's just going to be some things that we kind of have to wait and see how the chips fall. That being said, I will note that you may have seen the news in the last few weeks that MDARD has announced the new full-time appointment of the new director, and that's Tim Boring, who was serving as the what's the title at FSA, the
State Executive Director.
State Executive Director. Thanks, John, of FSA. We have a really good relationship with Tim. We've worked really closely with him in a number of capacities. Both his present and past roles. So from the association's perspective, we're really excited about what Tim brings to the table for this role at MDARD. And so we're hoping Jerry and I are hoping to connect with him here in the next couple of weeks once he gets a little bit settled, and we can have a chance to talk a little bit more in detail as to what things look like from MDARD's budgetary standpoint. So kind of a long answer, but things are coming along, and we're having a lot of really positive meetings. And stay tuned in Slack. I'll try to update as anything critical comes along. Okay, and then let's see other questions in the chat here. I'm trying to quickly scroll through. Let's see. Do you have any tips for, this is from Ashley Ryder. Do you have any tips for trying to engage directors to help with the 5-year long range plan, so that it's not just the district managers responsible and having input?
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe Christy could weigh in with any advice.
I would be glad to. So I did see that Jerry put some great tips in here, and also I would consider, based on my experience as a district manager conducting this type of project, is doing a survey. You can do that electronically if your managers are electronically savvy. If they're not, you could do a paper style one and have them send back their survey or drop that off to you. You can do it. I encourage you to do some kind of interaction in your meeting. And if you need some ideas with tips or tools to do that, I know I'm available, and I don't know who your RC is. They may have some ideas, but definitely feel free to reach out to me by phone or through email, and I can maybe give you some specific activities that you could easily interject into a district meeting that wouldn't take a long time. But definitely you want to get their input in the process.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat. If anyone would like to ask their questions live, you can raise your hand. You can do this by clicking on the reactions button, and then you'll see a big bar there that says raise hand. If you go ahead and click that, I can call on you and unmute you. So we're happy to take any questions people might have. It looks like Emily asked a question here in the chat. If we realize that quarter one has mistakes in it, do you want those fixed when we submit the whole document for quarter two?
Yeah, please. That's the best way to do it. Just go in and make those corrections to Q1. Again, the way this is designed is they all fold into that summary tab. And so really you have the opportunity to change any mistakes all the way up until quarter four. So that's the best way to do it.
So I also want to note too, for district managers and folks that are doing the reporting on this, I wanted to actually thank John and the rest of the MDARD staff in the conservation program because of the addition of trees reported from tree sale. This is a number that I think does a really good job of telling our story collectively in terms of our impact from a carbon sequestration standpoint, as well as all the benefits that trees have when we plant them. And this is a figure I think that we haven't really collectively counted in the past. And so I'm really excited to see once these numbers come in post tree sale, what our collective impact is and how many trees we're planting on an annual basis as districts. I think this is a really exciting number that's going to go a long way in telling our story as districts. And I also just wanted to comment too that I think, when we first were talking about reporting standards and requirements for the grant, we really wanted to avoid things coming off as just bean counting. So we hope that all of you understand that with these reports, that this information is so critical for us to really tell our story. And I think, in partial, a good amount of our success that we've had with some of our legislative advocacy goals has really come from our ability to better tell our story. So this information, I think, is going to make that a lot easier, and I'm really excited about that the more that we see these reports coming out. So I see a couple hands up here. First of all, I see Elizabeth, you asked the question in chat. Do you want district managers to attend Capital A or only board members? I would say that, board members are great, but staff are great as well too. District managers, I know folks have definitely brought both directors and managers. Just be cognizant that you can't use district resources to advocate. So if you are educating and informing legislators about the work that you're doing versus saying, we want you to give us money, there's a difference between the two. So just be cognizant of that. And be aware of how you're spending district resources in that capacity. But I would definitely say that both provide a good perspective, especially when we start talking about issues like staff retention and other issues that are facing districts. Having that perspective from staff goes a long way. So then I see Rachel and Maddie. We'll go in that order. Rachel, if you want to go ahead.
Hey there, thanks. I was just wondering if it might be valuable information to collect what we would be doing if we had more money, or what else we would like to accomplish just for future, campaigning.
That's an interesting question. I think, sharing that at least with Jerry or myself is a good way for us to kind of hear and get an idea. I think when we go into those legislative meetings and we're talking to legislators, we really try to frame it the best we can based on our understanding from hearing from members in terms of, what additional funding would cover. Currently, if you've seen our legislative handout, we're covering specifically the idea that if we had the additional supplementary money, enough to have a conservation planner on staff, as well as a full-time outreach person, would go a really long way in delivering, federal farm bill dollars to our local communities. So that's one of the biggest talking points that we're sharing when we meet with legislators. But if you've got ideas and you've got things that would go a long way in your community, we'd love to hear about them. So feel free to, shoot us a message in Slack or shoot me an email. I may not always be great about responding, especially with email, but Slack, I'm going to be a little bit more responsive. But I love to hear that input because it can go a long way with us telling our story and what we could do with more funding.
And I'll just add, Dan, in the template for the 5-year plan, I believe, and Chrissy or Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong. One of the things that we're asking you to fill out is, what are the priorities? What were the things that really came out as important issues in your needs assessment? And then what are the resources you have available to address those needs? And what are the resources you need to address those needs? So for example, if let's say a lack of recycling came up as a major priority, and you don't have a recycling program and you don't have funds to start or hire a recycling coordinator or something like that, you can identify that right in that strategic plan. And then hopefully we'll be able to pull, mine that data and be able to highlight some of those areas where there's a need. There's demand from the county, and there's a gap. There's a lack of funding, a lack of support, or a lack of programming to deliver on that. And so hopefully that's the way we can capture some of that as well.
So good question, Rachel. All right, and then Maddie, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute now.
Well, thanks so far for all of the information. This has been really great to clarify some things. I am wondering, and I apologize if I've missed this in an email anywhere, if it was ever decided whether produce safety techs and their managers are going to be required to be at summer conference. Not sure I am going to be able to take the time to make a trip down state for both Capitol Day and summer conference. Just kind of deciding what to do there.
Sure. Well, John, do you want to answer this one, or do you want me to?
Yeah, that's another good question, and also just had a discussion about that as well. I'm going to be surveying the other program managers to get an official answer and get that out in an email, similar to what I did last year with by program what the expectations are for summer conference. So we hope to have that out to you all here very, very soon.
Okay. And what was the date, Dan, to RSVP with Taylor by?
So we were asking people to RSVP, I believe, by the 6th.
Okay.
So then that way it gave us a good window to get legislative meetings scheduled. Oftentimes legislators have very busy schedules, so the more advanced notice we have, the easier it is for us to schedule them.
Okay, thank you.
Right, any other questions? So, and kind of piggybacking a little bit on John's comments about summer conference, once we kind of get some clarity on some of these programs, we are doing things a little bit differently for summer conference than we have in the past. And so we're hoping that ultimately the program that we put together is going to be one that's exciting and engaging for everyone. We're trying to get out of the sort of traditional tracks that we've put everyone in. And we're in favor of more generalized and interesting and engaging and inspiring kind of content. So if you're on the fence about summer conference, maybe just based on past experiences of attending, I definitely want you to think about it attending this year, because it's going to be a little bit different and in a good way. So after having a few under my belt now, one virtual and one in person, I think it was a good opportunity to kind of change some things up a little bit and hopefully get away from some of the sort of stale past programming we've done. So I'm excited. I've been reviewing a lot of the summer conference proposals, and I think there's going to be some really cool sessions. So I can't wait to share that schedule with everyone once it's come together. All right, any other questions? If you want to raise your hand or ask it in the chat, feel free. We'll just kind of give a minute here for everyone to kind of let it marinate for a minute in case anyone's thinking on something or. Okay, so John shared contact information here. So if anyone has any questions that come up after this, feel free to reach out to any of the regional coordinators. Or to John, or of course, to Jerry or me. We're always happy to be a resource for you. So Rachel asked if you could please share the slide deck. Well, I will say too that if John's willing to share it, that'd be great. But we're also recording this, and this will be available on MACD's YouTube channel if anyone wants to come back to reference this presentation, or if you have anyone from your respective districts who weren't able to join us tonight, they can come back and watch it there accordingly too.
And I'd be happy to send you a PDF of this, Dan, so you can have it, you know, if someone requests it via email or something like that. That'd be
Excellent. Well, you can even better, I could upload it to our box, and then we can make it a link on the YouTube video. So if anyone wants to download it that way, and I'll of course share it in Slack too for folks who are on Slack. Okay, so this will be the last chance for any remaining questions or comments people might have.
Well, while people are thinking about that last minute tricky question for me or my team, I'd just like to thank Dan and Jerry and MACD for the opportunity to present this information to everyone here this evening, and can't thank you all enough for the great hard work you did last year and the work I know you're continuing to do this year, both on the operations grant as well as everything that you do. So thank you for that. I appreciate everything you all do.
Our pleasure, John. All right. Well, with that, I think that's going to be it. We're going to call it unless someone has any last lingering questions they want to ask. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and call it a night. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and looking forward to everything we have coming up over the next few months. There's some exciting things. So, you know, with everything that's coming down from the Inflation Reduction Act and those opportunities, this is going to be a really exciting year for Michigan's conservation districts. So thank you all for all the work that y'all are doing. So, all right. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.